For nearly 2 decades, the EU and India have been negotiating a free trade agreement. Like most of the EU's prospective trade deals, negotiations have proceeded sporadically, and there was a sense not too long ago that the deal was essentially dead in the water. However, having been tentatively revived in 2022, negotiations have been given fresh impetus by Trump's tariff-induced disruption to global trade, which has left countries across the world, including India and most of Europe, scrambling to diversify their trading relationships. Negotiations are apparently going so well that, a couple of days ago, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz suggested the deal could be signed by the end of this month, hot on the heels of the long-awaited EU-Mercosur trade deal, which the EU approved last week. So in this video, we're going to look at how negotiations have progressed over time, what a final EU-India free trade agreement might end up looking like, and whether this means the EU has finally got its trade mojo back. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. So let's start with a bit of context. Discussions on a free trade agreement between India and the EU actually began way back in 2007, but stalled in 2013, largely because India, which produced more than half the developing world's generic drugs back then, didn't want to sign up to EU drug patent rules. Talks were only formally restarted nearly a decade later, in June 2022. This reflected political changes in both India and Europe. In India, there's been a renewed push for economic liberalisation in the past couple of years, as evidenced by the flurry of new free trade agreements that India has signed since the pandemic, including deals with Mauritius, the UAE, Australia, the UK, New Zealand and Oman. India even signed a free trade deal with the European Free Trade Association states, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway and Switzerland in 2024, which came into force a couple of months ago and probably played a part in rejuvenating trade negotiations with the EU. Anyway, in Europe, the pandemic and then Putin's invasion of Ukraine spurred interest within the EU about diversifying its trade relationships in order to make the European economy more resilient to external shocks, and a deeper economic relationship with India, one of the world's largest and fastest growing economies, seemed like a good way of doing that. Anyway, after 2022, negotiations continued at a steady pace, but accelerated a year or so ago when Trump started whacking tariffs on everyone. Trump has been particularly tough on both India and the EU. He put a 15% tariff on European imports coming into the US, as well as threatening various other non-tariff measures, and a 50% tariff on Indian imports coming into the US back in August. Trump claimed this was mostly about punishing India for buying Russian oil. But we should say that, whilst it's true that India buys a lot of oil, this is because the Biden administration, which was very focused on keeping India on side in what they saw as an ongoing geopolitical battle with China, literally set up its sanctions regime to allow India to continue importing Russian oil. So you can see why India might be a bit irked by Trump's criticism. Anyway, these tariffs represented a real risk to both the Indian and European economies, given that the US is, or at least was before Trump's tariffs, the largest export market for both India and the EU. According to data from 2024, for instance, India exported $88 billion worth of stuff to the US, more than twice what it exported to any other individual country, while the EU exported over $500 billion worth of stuff, more than twice what it exported to China. Trump's tariffs thus partly deprived both India and the EU of access to their largest export market, pushing European and Indian exporters to look for new markets. As such, an EU-India free trade deal would go some way to achieving this. From the EU's perspective, a free trade deal would mean better access to the Indian market, which is currently protected by some pretty steep tariffs. For context, according to WTO data for 2023, India currently has a trade-weighted average tariff rate of 12%, with tariffs above 100% on lots of agricultural products, and around 30% for most manufactured products. This is far higher than not only the EU, which has a trade-weighted average tariff rate of just 2.8%, but also similar economies like China, Mexico, and Brazil, which all have trade-weighted averages of between 3 and 7%. India would make an impressive addition to the EU's already impressive network of free trade agreements, which now spans most of the world, with the notable exceptions of the US, China, Russia, and ASEAN. While most analyses expect the agreement to have a negligible impact on EU GDP in the short term, this could change in the future if India's economy continues along its current trajectory. For context, India has been essentially the world's fastest growing economy since 2015, with GDP growth averaging about 7% annually. If this continues, the Indian economy could soon be the third largest economy in the world after the US and China, and better market access could then meaningfully advantage the European economy. Now, obviously, India has less to gain on the tariff side of things, given the EU already has pretty low tariffs on most imports, although we should expect the EU to still bring most of its remaining tariffs to zero. Rather, India will be pushing for stuff like deeper regulatory alignment to reduce non-tariff barriers that currently hinder trade with Europe. For instance, India will be looking for some sort of agreement on the EU's carbon tax, which India's Minister of Steel recently described as a bigger threat to Indian exports than Trump's tariffs. India will also be pushing new rules that will make it easier for European companies to invest in India, as well as making it easier for Indians to travel and work in Europe, although there's a limit to how much the EU can offer here, given that visa rules remain within the purview of member states, not the Commission. As a final thing, if a deal is agreed, it would be yet more evidence that the EU has got its trade mojo back. Not too long ago, it looked like the EU had essentially given up on new trade deals, intra-European disagreements, and the EU's focus on so-called values-based regulations, like climate and sustainability rules, which Europe's trade partners weren't keen to sign up to, reliably obstructed progress in negotiations. And the global trend towards protectionism boded ill for free traders across the world. Trump, however, has apparently changed all this. Since his return to office, the EU has signed a new deal with Mercosur, finalised a deal with Indonesia, and launched or relaunched talks with the Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates. This is probably a good thing, at least insofar as it helps reduce Europe's economic reliance on the US, which Trump has proved willing to exploit. Whether or not you believe that the new year brings a new you, there's always pressure to find some way to better yourself as January rolls around. But where do you even start? Building new healthy habits isn't always easy to jump straight into, so that's why we always turn to Brilliant. That's because Brilliant focuses on real, transformative learning, all while adapting to your own already established skill level. It starts you at the right level based on your background, and designs practice sets and reviews, personalised for you. Brilliant helps you advance at your ideal pace, giving you the best chance at sticking to your learning goals. For example, even if you think you're not a maths person, Brilliant will push you towards achieving what you didn't think was possible. Their comprehensive catalogue takes you from foundational maths through algebra all the way to college-level calculus, with more and more courses being added each month. Brilliant has truly helped us expand our skill set and keeps us coming back every day to create those habits that help us grow. Suddenly, it's not so hard to stick to resolutions. So to start the new year right and begin or continue your learning journey, you can try Brilliant for free for a full 30 days. Just go to brilliant.org/TLDR, scan the QR code on screen, or you can click the link in the description. Brilliant's also given our viewers 20% off an annual premium subscription, which gives you unlimited daily access to everything on Brilliant.